Still discussing the strike, the suspension, and what happens next. We're joined live by labor lawyer expert Ireoluwa Oguntoashe. Good morning. Glad to have you join me.
Yes, good morning. It's a pleasure having me this morning.
All right. How do you assess President Tinubu's commitment to establishing a national minimum wage higher than 60,000 naira?
Well, I would say it's the right step in the right direction. But again, we shouldn't be too happy about that step because establishing a minimum wage about 60,000 doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate to a living wage or something close to a living wage. And the reason I've said this is because, above 60,000 can be 61,000, can be 62,000. And that even will not have met up, with a bag of rice. And that would not have been enough to cater for every other thing that the employees, should have: basic necessities, basic needs. So I would say that while the president's commitment to ensure that the minimum wage is above 60,000 is commendable, but that commitment in itself, is a little bit ambiguous, and people should not see it as a welcome development until a definite agreement and resolution is achieved between the Labour and the federal government, which will now be seen as satisfactory, to all parties concerned.
But then, looking at the economic realities of things in Nigeria, what implications could 60,000 naira or even higher have on the, what impact would that make for workers in Nigeria looking at our living standards in Nigeria?
Well, if we have more than 60,000 or more, we need to consider the capacity of the citizens, the purchase capacity of the citizens. Of course, if, for example, I am working, I should be able to, by reason of me working, purchase some basic needs. It's not the fact that if I'm working, I should still be, before the month's end, probably be borrowing. It's not that people are spending lavishly, but it's that given the high rate of inflation, the money cannot even meet up. The amount they are collecting cannot even meet up. So the reason I'm saying this, in essence, is that if we look at the problems, the challenges the citizens are facing, the earning capacity compared to what they need to purchase is relatively low. They are earning low and they need to purchase something that is more. So this now brings up the issue of this particular minimum wage. And I think that the government needs to do much, to satisfy the yearnings of the citizens, because there has also been much distrust between the government and the citizens. Now, the citizens sees government as a group, as a small enclave of people that enjoys while the citizens are lavishing in penury. So that this is the extent to which this is the angle from which the citizens are looking at it. And I think this is the angle also from which the government should look at it, so that they can feel, what they can empathize with the citizens, and they can try and do something, which will, in a small measure, at least assuage that particular feeling.
Let's talk a bit about the tripartite committee. What if they fail to reach an agreeable national minimum wage within 5 days? What would happen if they fail to reach this agreeable national minimum wage within the 5-day suspension period?
Well, I believe that the response to that question is very clear. If they fail to reach, according to the agreement, the tentative agreement they have, if they fail to reach, then the expectation is that they're going to go back, to the national industrial action, which I don't pray happens anyway, because of the effect, this 2 or 3 days, because of what we have witnessed within these 2 or 3 days. So for me, I wouldn't want that to happen. And I think that is a sign of good faith by the Nigerian Labour Congress to also give the federal government a chance, such that they can also weigh their options, they can go into negotiation. Because in all of this, we should understand that is a case of the grass suffering when 2 elephants are fighting. We cannot remove the Nigerian Labour Congress from being an elephant in this particular thorny issue. So I would say that both parties should ensure that they reach an amicable resolution before the expiration period of the 1 week so that we will not witness what we witnessed in the past 2 days. It was a very harrowing experience for the citizens. And if we also look at the position of the health, I believe that a lot of people would have suffered. In fact, some people may have died. So these are the ways, the government and the Nigerian Labour Congress should also look at it, because it's going to have a spiral effect on the economy and all other sectors in the country.
Now, this is my next question for you. How might these impasse impact future negotiations and also likelihood of further industrial actions?
Well, I don't pray. I'm not even looking at the likelihood of further industrial action, because I believe that both parties should be able to reach an agreement. But again, I also believe that at this juncture, both parties have given themselves opportunity, for them to sit down and for them to talk. So at this juncture, I'm not looking at the possibility of them not settling it. I think labor should also come down from its ios to a very great extent. I'm looking at the possibility of both parties agreeing on 100,000 and above. If labor is going to be fair, that should be what they should be aiming at. I'm also looking at the possibility of the federal government also trying to come down to meet labor, at labor's level too, so that both parties, can have an agreement. Now, let's not forget that in situation where there is dispute between the parties, it is very necessary and compelling for both parties to shift ground, in trade dispute, so that they can reach an amicable resolution. So, with all due respect, contrary to your question, I'm not saying the negotiation extending beyond the 1 week period. Although I would also suggest that if both Labour and federal government have been able to agree on the implementation of the new minimum wage, the 5-year period that is contained in Section 3 of the Minimum Wage Act as the time, with the statutory period within which minimum wage should be reduced, should also be reduced in itself, because within that 5 years period, a lot of things can happen. And at that period of time, it is not mandatory on the federal government to review. It is merely discretionary on all parties, the organized private sector, the federal government and the state government, to review salary. So I'm thinking that in order to meet up with the rate of inflation, the labor should also be looking at the possibility of making a proposal that the 5-year tenure should also be reduced to, let's say, probably 2 years or 2.5 years.
Now, there's something I want to talk about. I want to get your perspective on it. Now, there's been various perspectives criticizing labor that they should protest instead the factors affecting prices of goods and services, as against protesting for increase in the minimum wage. What's your thought on this?
They should protest on the increase in goods and services in lieu of protesting for minimum. Well, I think that's a very interesting conversation. Controversial as it may seem, but I think that protest should also come together. Now, as far as the minimum wage is concerned, what labor is doing is statutory. I wouldn't want people to see it as if labor is just protesting on this issue of minimum wage. It is statutory. There is a minimum wage act that regulates it. There's a minimum wage act that governs the tripartite committee. That's Section 5, 6, and 7 of the Minimum Wage Act. There's also a minimum wage act that also recommends the timeline within which the new minimum wage should be implemented. So people should not see it as if labor are just becoming overbearing. No, they are answering their statutory functions. Now, as to increase in goods and services, I support it totally. I support it totally. And I think it's just a product of the federal government not looking at the plight of the people. Because it's not until labor protests, that the federal government will now see that there has been an increase in goods and services. They can see it. They stay in Nigeria. They can feel it. They know what the citizens are facing. I wouldn't want to believe that they don't know. If they don't know physically, they read it on the pages of newspaper. So I think without labor even putting it to the federal government that there has been an increase in goods and services, I think they can see it. And I think that the policies that the federal government has also churned out, from the outset of this administration, has also done a lot, to increase the prices of goods and services. So what I'm thinking is that in lieu of protesting for one or leaving the other, labor should have protested both together.
Well, while you were speaking, I know you talked about a possible agreement of about 100,000 naira agreed between labor and then the government. But then some persons say if that is done, then salaries across board should be increased, and this may lead to inflation. What's your reaction to that?
Well, as far as, okay, to even answer that question, I would ask, there is already inflation. There's already inflation without even increase in salary. In 2019, that we have the old regime of minimum wage, how much was a bag of rice? In 2019, that we had the old regime of the minimum wage, how much do you assess health? In 2019, that we had the regime of the minimum wage, how much was transportation? And let's compare it to now. The inflationary increase has been astronomical. So for me, I wouldn't want to subscribe to the fact that increase in minimum wage will lead to inflation, because there is already inflation. The inflation is palpable. Everybody can see it. And the inflation is now meeting a period in which the salaries have not even been increased. So the question is, how will the citizens cope with the inflation compared with the salaries they are earning? Now, there is a way federal government can do it. I identify the fact that that may also be something that will be looked into. But they should also understand that if the prices of goods and services is high and the earning capacity is low, the capacity to purchase is also low. It plunges the citizens down into the abyss of poverty. That is also another way they should look at it. And we are not saying that in increasing the minimum wage, they should set it at 400,000 or 500,000. In that situation, I know that the effect of that increase will be extremely seen on the economy, and it may be negative. But we are saying that let them just put it at a slight increase of 100,000, given the rate of inflation now, and given the high rates, the increase in the purchase of goods and services now, there is no way the citizens can cope. And the federal government should also be careful to an extent that the citizens should not take up the gauntlet and come out by themselves and start protesting. So that's why all these things need to be put in place. But for me, I don't think that increasing it in the range of 100,000 and a little bit above will lead to the expected rate of inflation that some people are anticipating.
Thank you so much for your insight on the news. Ireoluwa Oguntoashe, labor law expert. Thank you once again.
Yeah, you're welcome, and have a productive day.